Welcome to Hammered with Cars, presented by Troll Patrol Racing. This is episode 3. Again, your hosts TJ and Tyler. And we got a few things to go through. We got a correction with the M3 we talked about the last podcast, as well as, I guess you could say, a reveal on what tire I'm going to be using this year, as well as a little bit more information on a couple updates in the 200 treadwear tire market for this year. And then we'll kind of go through and show some video of the last event we were at, where you raced your S10.
Sonoma.
Sonoma, whatever. And I ended up racing my brother's Camaro because the Z31 is still not together. So I guess first to kick it off, the M3. A bit of a correction. We were still correct about how not great it looks. And actually, as I look at another picture of it here, it kind of looks like the Alfa Romero, what is it, Giulia?
A little bit, yeah.
Quadriplegic or whatever. That's what Jeremy it kind of looks like that, except the grill for it is just a lot bigger. But the tail, or like the headlights, I think are very similar in shape. It'll probably be a lot more reliable though. But we kind of talked about at the end, saying we hope we see it comes with a manual transmission.
Sure.
It's a 6-speed manual is the only transmission offered, and that's from Car and Driver.
Oh.
So I saw that like shortly after we
That's great news.
Yeah.
BMW always markets themselves as the driver's car.
Right.
And manual transmission is definitely the way to go on a
Right.
driver's car.
Now it does say, so it says the normal version, which has 473 horsepower, is only the 6-speed manual. But the M3 competition engine, which has 503 horsepower, will only be offered with an 8-speed automatic.
Intriguing.
Right. And rear-wheel drive for both, but then the competition will eventually be offered with all-wheel drive.
Sure.
So that's just a quick update and correction on the M3, just so that way we're not misrepresenting any information or misquoting any information.
Sure.
And then I didn't really reveal what tire size or what tire I was going to go with. Tire size was going to be always a 295 or 285. And then it started to look like it was going to be a 275 because
somebody sandbagged on one of the tires and everything was gone.
Well, yes, everything was gone. And actually the tire I was trying to get was the Cooper RS3R, which was seen at the end of last year. I never had really heard about it until this year, and it got mentioned in Midwestern Council meetings, and that's largely because Cooper Tires is now a sponsor of them as well. And that's Midwestern Council Sports Car Club. And so they talked about it. I guess a couple of the drivers said it felt like it had, RE1 RE71R levels of grip, but it wore much better.
Sure.
I don't think didn't wear quite as well as the Hankook RS4, but even improving on the RE71R's wear a little bit is something that'd be worth its weight in gold.
Yep.
So I was very tempted to get those. They were supposed to get in the States because the tire is actually manufactured in England, which is where Cooper manufactures all their performance tires. And I was actually working with Troy Simmons out of Extreme Tire and communicating with him. They were expecting it at the end of March. They're expecting to get the 295 size tire. And if you go onto their website right now, you can get up to a 265, which I could have squeezed onto a 10.5-inch rim, but I didn't really want to run something that stretched. So I was waiting for the 295 because it's supposed to come in at the end of March, and then it didn't, and then it was going to be beginning of April, and then it didn't, and so I called and talked to Troy about it, because one of the concerns I had when I first talked to him about this is with material allocations happening kind of all over the world and every market right now, you're just seeing shortages on everything, and I was worried that I was going to essentially miss out on getting a 295 size tire, and that feeling was only exacerbated by when the federal 595 RSRR came out and they announced the 295 size tire. I only saw one place that had it for sale, and by the time they got back to me in my email, they only had 2 tires left.
Sure.
And they weren't expecting any more until June.
Hmm.
So that's what worried me, but it sounded like these were going to come in, so I thought, okay, I'll wait, try something new. If they're as good as they're saying, great. I might have a little edge this year on some people or something. Or if they're not, then test and fail and learn from it, whatever.
Right. At least you had tires to go around the track.
Right. And as they got pushed off, I started to see everything go away. 285s, 275s. I could have gotten like 285 RE71Rs, but I didn't. I mean, you look at a 285 tread width, and I think it's like 10.3 inches or something like that, and you compare it to a 275 tread width on like a Falcon, and a Falcon 275 is about a half-inch bigger tread width.
Right.
So it was one of those things is like, okay, I don't really want to run that. Falcon RT 660s, they had completely fallen off the map as far as availability. So I couldn't find those anywhere. I really started to panic, and basically what Troy told me was if I came across something, buy it, because he just
couldn't guarantee.
He didn't have the confidence anymore, which I really appreciate. He was really easy to work with.
Yep.
So one Saturday morning, I was perusing eBay, and I found some 295 Federals. So I went back to my original option. As you can see, I've got these babies already mounted. They do look
fat.
They look fat. They almost look a little stretched, but I think that's just 295 30s.
Well, I also think that it's just the fact that they have a huge curb protection lip on them.
Right, right. That's true
out,
too.
That sticks out a half inch farther than the wheel.
Right, and I'm comparing this with Hoosier 295s, because that's what I had on the
which
wheel
have
before.
almost no curb protection.
Right. But as far as, you stack the tires next to each other, and I mean, they seem identical in width. So I'm very happy with that I actually got something for the season. I mean, I've got plenty of experience with the RR, so it won't be too much of a learning curve, I've always really liked the way they've acted. They hold up very well for high-speed autocross and autocross events. So it should be a fun tire, and I won't have to change out from slicks to street tires at every event.
And maybe more importantly, you won't have to hire somebody to haul them.
Yeah, because I would not bite the bullet and put a trailer hitch on the Z31. So the Cooper RS3R was the unnamed tire I was talking about last time. Just hoping I could kind of surprise people with that. Unfortunately, that just didn't happen. I'm still excited to see what it can do. The tread pattern looks like the old Toyo R888.
Yep.
Which is a 100 tread wear tire. So I mean, the tire looks good. We'll see how it holds up. It's got a 260 tread wear rating instead of a 200 tread wear rating, which my theory behind...
Which is interesting that people who have tested it suggest that it works better than popular 200 treadwear tires, or as good as 200 treadwear tires.
Which everyone knows treadwear ratings are subjective.
Just a bunch of BS.
Yeah, I mean, when they changed the minimum treadwear rating from 140 to 200, you saw a bunch of exactly, including federal. And that's not to say they didn't make some changes or something like that, but
There's no guarantee that they did either.
right, exactly. So my theory is that the 260 is what they set the rating for, in hopes that
When they build a faster tire, they can just
drop.
the tread wear
Yeah,
rating
yeah,
down
yeah,
a
yeah,
little
yeah.
bit.
You know, they're not. Yeah, they can just bump the tread wear rating down, which they do. Cooper does have a 200 tread wear, 220 tread wear tire, but it doesn't. They don't really market it as a faster tire than these.
Sure.
Which is kind of interesting. So I'm interested to see. I don't know if we'll see any of those at autocrosses. My guess is you'll be lucky to see them at autocrosses. They'll be kind of far and few between. They might be more
Sounds
used.
like they had smaller sizes available, so look for them on
Yeah,
Miatas and things of that nature that have
yeah.
smaller
So
tires.
it shows here on their website that they've got 195 16, and then they have a 195 15 and a 205 15, which that's pretty small even for Miatas. I mean, Miatas
Yeah,
run
no, it is.
225 and 245 is kind of the new size for Miatas to run.
Anything below a 200, that's like go-kart and bicycle sizes.
Right, right. And then it jumps up to 17 225, 18 225, 17 255, and 18 265. And there was the 295 that I was talking about, that's to come, and a 245 15. So that would be the other Miata size. So that actually is probably that could be a good indicator of them trying to aim more at the Miata endurance racing.
Yep.
So because that's kind of what that tire seems more marketed as. And then one of the new tires to be announced within the last couple days, really.
Suddenly hit the market.
Yep, was the Continental. And it's called the Extreme Contact Force. And that has just come out. I know this doesn't have pricing on it.
I can get it on my phone
Yep.
real quick.
I know it wasn't like it was. It's going to be expensive. It's going to be, they're right up there with all the other name brand 200 treadwear tires.
Right.
With maybe a little bit less name behind them. Not that people don't know Continental. I mean, Continental has a huge racing history. Yeah, so you got 245 18s at $240. That's pretty up there. 275 at 18,
Yep.
295. That's pretty expensive for
Yeah,
a
it's
275.
most certainly not a budget tire.
No,
That's for sure.
no, and that, again, this almost seems like it's
Not that Continental has ever been known for budget
tires.
But, if their performance lives up to their price, I would imagine that they'll end up being a very popular tire.
Right, and the other thing that's interesting about this, it's a 200 treadwear tire, but they're not even aimed at autocross. It even says you're aimed at endurance use, AER, WRL, Champ Car, Lemons, SCCA, Track Night in America.
So you might end up with something that's more along the lines of an RS4 with a higher grip level.
Right. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see.
A little bit harder to get warmed up.
Yep.
But grips really well once it's warmed up, and just has a longer tread
Yeah.
life.
So if your cup of tea, I guess you could say, is HPDE and high speed autocross and time trial and stuff, or some of that wheel to wheel endurance stuff like the Champ Car and Lemons. That Continental might be one of the ways to go.
Yep. The only other thing, or another huge thing that they have over other brands, is the fact that they have a 345 section width tire.
Right.
That's going to be available for that tire. There's not really any other 200 treadwear tires out there that offer that sort of a huge size.
Right, which it's it's this link here or article about it on Grassroots Motorsports brings up the 345 size tire for 18. Typical fitments is C5, Z06, or sorry, Corvette C5, and then Z06 2009 to 2013, Viper GTS, and ACR 2014 to 2019.
Yep.
So it'll be, I mean, I'm not sure where the Kumo V730 is going to come into play here, because everyone's kind of expecting that to essentially be the V720 ACR. But it's, and I don't know. I have no idea what the V720 ACR was. If it was more of an endurance-based tire, it sounds like people tried to use it for autocross, and that's why it got banned from a lot of autocross style events.
That, specifically some people who have done some major events like King of the Mountain and the, what was it,
Ultimate Street Car?
No, the World Autocross shootout that they did last year.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
There were people specifically looking for those ACR tires for that event.
Just because they wanted the larger size.
Because they wanted that tire.
Oh, okay.
Like specifically calling it by name because they wanted that tire, not because they were looking for a tire in that size.
Okay. Yeah, so I mean they're going right for the ACR stuff. So it'll be interesting to see if you do see this at autocross on some of the cam cars and stuff that are running 315s or trying to run 335s, because I think your main competition at that point would be like the BF Goodrich Rival 1.5S and Falcon, which I feel like Falcon's going to be a pretty hard one to beat, especially if you're marketing it as an endurance tire, because these are going to be more expensive than the Falcons, but not that much bigger. And I know, like we talked about earlier tonight before we got on here, just like Treadwear, the section with Matt, there's a little bit more consistency with the
as there should be, because it's an actual, that's the number of millimeters that it's supposed to be wide, but yet that seems to be an ambiguous measurement.
Yes, yeah, it seems completely irrelevant. It just depends on the manufacturer. I love it when you see people reviewing tires and they're like, yeah, we got two 275s, and this one seems to be a little wide, and it's, it looks like it's almost a half-inch wider. Yeah, I know. I saw a comparison photo of the Falcon RT 660s, and it was a 245 and a 255, and the difference was like negligible. You could hardly see a difference.
Yeah.
And so the big question was like, okay, is it really worth the extra money to buy the 240 or the 255 over the 245?
Right.
Which I'd say at that point it can't be that much more. It's probably $20 more tire or something like that. Just bite the bullet and get it. But it'll be interesting to see. Is their 245 really going to be a 245, or rather, is Falcon's 235, not 235, 335? Is it going to be more like a 345, or what the market would expect, a 345? And another place we've seen that is with Hoosiers. The 255-18 is like 0.1. The 255-18 is like 0.1 inch smaller in tread width compared to the 275-18.
Right.
So are they just fudging that stuff to meet some class rules? I don't know. I'm sure it depends on what you're racing in, but that's kind of what it seems like. So that's kind of the update on 200 treadwear tires. We'll see what happens next. Yeah, I mean you won't see Continental.
Yeah, they're not supposed to come, like most of those sizes aren't supposed to arrive till late this year, I don't think, right?
Right. First tire should be available June 1st.
Right.
So, I mean, you're definitely not going to see anything like you won't see them in SCCA really big, because they're not going to be used for nationals. Or, I mean, you won't see them in SCCA solo or whatever it is, the autocross, because it just won't be a valid tire for competition. So we'll see.
Time will tell.
I'm glad to see
245s
345s, because I really don't think I've seen 345s.
Yeah, that's a huge tire.
Before. I know. It came out and I saw the 295 tire size, and I was like, well, That would have been kind of nice to know. Maybe that's something I could get, but that also would have been too long of a wait.
Right.
But so first event, we had our first event with Madison Sports Car Club doing an autocross, and you brought the Sonoma, not the S10, the Sonoma, and not the Corvette.
Right. Haven't done the health check on the Corvette to make sure that it's race worthy for the season. So, towards the end of last season, I ended up having some problems where, while driving, anything above idle, oil pressure was totally fine. But down at idle, when it was good and warmed up, it only had anywhere from 0 to 3 psi of oil pressure. So just never let it idle.
Just never let it idle.
So I
keep your
foot.
foot.
I got a mechanical gauge that I need to install and just find out if the electronic gauge is wonky or if it actually is having oil pressure issues. So I don't need to be that guy that
Right.
paints a nice black stripe and puts metal pieces all over the track.
And this track we raced on is a quarter mile. Is that right?
3/8 mile.
3/8 mile circle track, and we were able to use some of the infield crossover section areas.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of a smaller track, but it was
It's a lot of fun.
it was a pretty long
Yeah.
one, pretty fun.
We always have, I know some people don't like the Jefferson venue because it's small and it's difficult, near impossible to get 2 cars on track or more
Right.
at one time, but it makes for some really tight little intricate tracks that
Right.
you don't have to have a horsepower hungry car
Right.
to be competitive there.
Right. I know my first concern when I saw the track, and this was more of a condition of the day, and I wasn't quite sure what the weather was going to do. I know we had an idea of what the weather was going to do, but I wasn't really sold on the idea of what the weather was going to do. We got there; it had been raining in the morning, so the track was damp, and they set up what is relatively a long course
Yeah.
for that track. And my concern was, oh man, it's going to take people forever to get around this. And thankfully, we didn't get hit with rain. It actually ended up being a very quick track and
partly sunny, and everything was dried off by the end of the first heat.
Yep.
We had a really nice day, actually.
Yeah, no, it was pretty good. Do you think you would have done better in the Corvette?
Yes.
Because
Horsepowers.
you mean that 2.2?
No, that poor thing's anemic. I mean, so thing is the only way you find out how fast you can go through a slalom is to mess it up at least once.
Mm-hmm.
And I never messed it up all day, so I could have went faster.
Oh.
And the thing is from the starting line, you go down through the first 2 lane change gates and then into the slalom.
Right. Yep.
That poor little wheezy S10, or Sonoma rather, it's just flat-footed until you get to the slalom, and then you just dive into the first slalom and you just tap the brakes to set the front end, and then you're just back on the power out through the slalom and all the way around the back corner.
Right.
So,
Yep.
horsepower is clearly its biggest deficit.
Right.
It has really good handling capabilities. The 595 RSRR tires do a great job on that truck for me.
Right.
It just needs more horsepower. And the Corvette, that thing's just sloppy old all factory rubber bushings, and
Right.
the suspension's definitely not anything to get super excited about, but it is a Corvette, and it does handle relatively well.
And it's got torque.
And it's got at least 3 times the amount of torque
Right.
compared to my S10. And the gearing in that car, especially on a track like Jefferson,
What
the
is
gearing would be perfect.
Yep. because you'd just gotten to second and just
Yep.
left it. Yep.
Whereas with the S10, it's got a relatively short rear end ratio in it.
Okay.
I think it's a 373
Okay.
rear end in that truck. So even as low horsepower as it is, it's geared so short that by the time I was coming out of the last corner on that backstretch, I would have to shift into third.
Yep.
Otherwise, it would be running out of revs by the time I came across the finish line. And when you shift into third, it just doesn't go anywhere.
What are you doing? Why are you doing this to me?
It's pretty sad that between coming out of the last corner and then through those offset gates through the finish line, I maybe gained like 4 miles an hour. Whereas other high horsepower cars are gaining like 15 an hour.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
So.
Yeah, no, and kind of going back into, I know we've obviously beat to death the whole 200 treadwear tire conversation, but as a preliminary look into the year,
which tires are placing highest?
Actually, the first two, which were only. Yeah, okay. I thought they were a little bit closer, but they're 0.4 of a second off of each other. Was
the two highest.
The two highest
finishers. Yeah,
the two highest finishers. And the first one, they were on AO52s as well as the second one.
Right.
Car that ended up finishing first was a 1988 Honda CRX, which the driver is a great driver, and I believe he's been to nationals before and actually won at nationals.
Yep.
And then the second car was a Hyundai Veloster N, which has been a
shockingly well sorted car for a Hyundai.
Yeah, I know it's been a pretty good. I've
This
seen him do pretty good things.
This one being in B
autocrosses.
race, I know that it has quite a few modifications done to it, but we've also had Veloster N's show up in stock class,
Right.
and place very well.
Right. Well, I mean, because they're classed in with SCCA, they're classed with the Ford Focus RS.
Sure.
And the
Focus
Ford
RS is all-wheel drive.
Right. So it's a pretty well sorted out car.
Yep.
So AO52s were the 1-2 tires, and the difference between first place and third place was just under a second, and the difference between second place and third place was 0.6 of a second, or just under 0.6 of a second. So you can see there's those AO52s, which I'm driver and everything also, but
Yep.
they clearly seem to make a gap. And then the third place, for all my bias against them,
Yeah,
was
totally shocking. Mind equals blind.
Right, was on Hankook RS4s, which
Yep.
would not have been possible if it had rained. He would have died. He would have hit the wall and died.
Especially in a rear-wheel drive car.
Right, yeah, that was in a Fiat
Spider.
124 a Barth, right? A Barth?
A Barth, yeah.
A Bath. And then actually in fourth place,
Would
who
be
was
a Troll Patrol member.
Yep, who was a second behind the first place person, was on Federal Pros.
Yep.
Which was pretty interesting to see. Our buddy Ryan has done a lot of work to set up that car. And you can see in our past videos of some of the stuff that he's done with the work that I've been doing on the Z31 as far as rebuilding shocks, revalving them to meet the car or set up for that car specifically as it is. So taking into account the corner balancing, the weight and everything, the spring rates, as well as motion ratio and things like that.
Right.
So just taking all of that into account, and he set that car up very well. He's obviously had to do a few custom things, like make custom front control arms, because the OEM control arms just did not have, they just did not have the geometry he needed. So he's still playing with that. I'm not sure. And he actually went down from was it a 265 or was he on 275s? I don't think he was on 275s.
No.
Reed's on the 275s. And Kyle's on the 275 federal RSRRs. But he went from a 265 RSRR and went down to a 255 RS Pro. And that may have played into part of his ability to run a little bit faster. Because a big reason he did that was getting heat in the rear tires was always such an issue for him.
Yeah.
With it being such a front-heavy car, front-wheel drive car, and a torquey car. You know, he had no problem putting heat in the front tires.
All the problems putting the heat in the rear tires.
Right. Which I don't know if that's something. I know we've talked about it before with some other front-wheel drive cars. They'll run a smaller tire size in the rear
Just
and a
to
larger one up in the
Yep.
front. But for
More for rotational purposes.
Yeah,
than it is
yeah,
for heated tires.
yeah,
in
yeah,
those cases.
Yep. Well, yeah. Rotational. It's rotational purposes, but it is also heat because if you don't want to add weight to the rear end, or they're trying to
Right.
keep weight as much weight out of the car, and if they go up to too high of a tire size, they don't put enough pressure onto the tire over that area,
Right.
and then they can't get the heat in it. So some of it is heat related, and you can't actually get the tire in that optimal temperature range. Or sorry, not optimal, but operating temperature range.
Yep.
And so you have grip issues. And the reason Ryan didn't do something like larger front, smaller rear is
He wants to be able to rotate.
yeah, just from
Otherwise, on that poor car, you go through like 4 sets of fronts for one
right,
set of rears.
right, yeah. So then after that, you kind of saw in fifth place was a RE71R, BF Goodrich rival 1.5 S. Right. Yep.
Yep.
Following.
Sorry, we gotta pause. I'm gonna pee my pants.
Oh my god. Okay, well you go pee your pants. I'm not gonna pause it.
So just back up and start like in 5th place again.
And we're back from the pee break. All right. Yeah, so I said 5th place was RE71R. Then 6th place was a BF Goodrich rival. So the kind of top tires right where you'd expect them to be. I'm happy to see the Pro up there. Haven't really seen any reviews. I know we talked about that last time.
Yep.
It'd be interesting. I would just wish tires weren't so expensive to put a review. Because
Yeah.
track time really isn't.
No, track
'Cause
time
you can-
is shockingly inexpensive
Yeah.
if you get the right place.
Right. And then from there, I'm not sure exactly what other people were running, but I know some RE7Rs, again, up there in the top 10 and top 20. So kind of what you'd expect. We kind of finished a little bit lower.
Right. But I mean, one of us is in a car that has good horsepower and
No
stock
suspension.
suspension. The other one of us is in a vehicle that has pretty decently sorted suspension and no
Yeah.
power.
Yep. So I drove my my brother's 1984 Chevy Camaro, the Flaming Camaro, as it's been
Flaming
dubbed, for its awesome paint job. I think.
I think it's cool.
I love it because it's not gaudy flames like the red, and
Yeah.
it's not the hot rod style flames. It's a little bit
Almost
more
kind
subtle,
of a ghost
but
flame.
yeah, but I think it fits the car and the era of the car very well.
Yeah.
And that's a refreshed 355 that my brother just rebuilt. It's got some Pro Max heads in it. I think it's like a 10-to-1 or 10.5-to-1 compression.
Sure.
Headers, Edelbrock dual plane intake, and then Edelbrock 750 carb. And that was just on Falcon.
RT 650K plus.
Yes, 245s, and then he's got a Eaton LSD in it.
Yep.
Helical LSD, and then the suspension is completely bone stock, so rubber bushings. He does have EBC yellow brakes up front, and he did a conversion. Sorry, a rear disc brake conversion to kind of help with that. Did have some issues with braking throughout the day. I'm not sure what it was, if there's just air in the lines or something that need to be bled out, or if I don't think it needs a larger reservoir.
Could be a
or
vacuum
anything.
booster.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what was happening. The brake light was coming on as I was coming off the course, and I'm not sure what it was. It's not like the Z31. It has a sensor in there for brake fluid level.
Sure.
But this doesn't. So I don't think it was a brake fluid level. I'm not sure. I'm not sure where the sensor is for the brakes. I'm not sure why it was coming on. I'd pump the brakes a few times and then the light would turn off, and that's kind of what was making me think, okay, there might be air in the lines or something.
Sure.
But you go out there for that, like you said, you went through those 2 gates and right into the slalom, and you hit the brakes, and the brakes were great. And then you got about halfway around the track, and you kind of realize,
brakes are getting a little sketchy.
Yeah, the brakes aren't quite there. But no, it was a really fun car to drive. Longer wheelbase than the Z31, so it's a lot easier to control on a slide, and then with the power and torque it has, it just makes it a blast to slide around. So it was, I was pretty happy with the car. I was very, very afraid when we showed up and it was raining, or it had been raining, and the course was wet, because my brother even said to me as I picked up the car, he goes, well, if it rains tomorrow, good luck. It's
decent low end torque plus rain equals sketchy.
Yeah, well, no suspension or anything like that. It just, but no, it actually did very well. Or as far as controlling it, it was very easy to control. It never felt like, oh my god, I'm gonna die. But definitely not as nice as the Z31.
Yeah. Yeah, having a well-sorted suspension means everything.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah, and I guess what I'm hoping to do with the Z31, obviously with the not running wider tires than I have before with a street tire. I really only ran on the slicks last year for 5 total events, and that was with 2 events. The one day, I don't think we got above 65, and there was not a lot of sun.
Yeah.
And a lot of wind, so the track never got warm, the tires never got warm, and I made tire blankets.
And they worked.
They did. You can actually see the video of that DIY tire blankets that I think all in all cost me like $30 to make on our Facebook page. And they did work, but the second event, or the next event after I made the tire blankets, I think the warmest it got that day, and this is probably the coldest autocross I've done in a while, was like 50 degrees.
Yep.
And that was the high for the day, and that's why I'm saying I think it was like the coldest, because it was like 36 when we got there in the morning or something. It
Real
was
cold.
Yep, it was pretty cold. But and if you're wondering why I didn't run my street tires at the time, they were the 265 Federal RSRRs, which I had been running, but they had they were 3-year-old tires.
Very minimal tread depth left.
Yeah, there wasn't much left to them, and it was kind of one of those things. I didn't think it was gonna serve me any better, and I really wanted to see if I could get the tire blankets to work, and they did work, but I don't think they got me into the operating temperature of the tire.
Yeah.
Still did okay that day, but
everyone else had the same struggle.
Right.
Everyone else drove on the same temperature track with the same temperature air.
Right. Well, I would argue that 200 treadwear tires,
they do heat up quicker.
Well, they heat up quicker. Well, I don't know if I'd
not
say
necessarily.
I wouldn't say heat up quicker,
have a lower
but
operating temperature.
Right, or rather that their the gap between the level of grip, or the gap between their level of grip between starting out and when they reach their operating temperature isn't as vastly different as it is with the A7.
Right.
And I may be wrong. I mean, that's my first time driving on an A7, or using an A7 really, other than maybe in Ryan's car a few times when I've co-drove with him.
Yep.
Um,
Which, up until this year, I've only ever had slicks on the truck before.
right, which you had the
I had Toyo Proxys RRs.
Yeah,
And I was always really, really happy with those tires. Never
Right.
disappointed. Even though when I used them last season, they were 4 or 5 years old. That's really old for a slick.
right, yeah, right,
And,
right. Stored well though, right?
yes, always
Yeah,
stored
yeah.
inside, always in a climate-controlled environment. But at the beginning of the last event, I was like, man, I think these things are just heat cycled out. There's nothing left in these. But then once it got a little warmer in the afternoon and I started pushing the truck harder, I was kind of like, no, there's still really good grip here.
Right.
But then this first autocross of the season, it was cold, started out damp, and this is my first time ever having a 200 treadwear tire on the truck for an event.
Right.
And I was very, very well pleased with
Okay.
how well they worked. Even though I didn't use my temperature probe to check the temperature of the
Right,
tires, but
right.
just laying your hand on it, they never got anything past lukewarm.
Okay.
They never,
yeah,
they
yeah,
never
I-
actually
yeah.
got heated up at this last event, and
Right.
I was surprised
Right, because it's still a
with how
relatively
much grip they had.
cool day. I
Yeah.
don't. It wasn't as cold as that last event.
No.
Or it wasn't the last event of the year, but it was the last
No.
event I did last year.
Yep.
Because I think it started out as a similar temperature in the morning, but we got up maybe to 60 degrees, and the big difference was we had the sun come out.
Sunshine
Yeah,
on the
we had
track.
sun come out in the track and everything. Yeah, because I was getting good heat into the Falcons on my brother's Camaro.
Yep. And there again, that's a horsepower thing.
But front and rear, which
Yeah.
I mean, I guess that is a horsepower thing.
It
You're
is.
just able to throw that much more heat into the tires by, causing that much more friction in the rear with the power, but then also having to
Braking.
stop. Yeah.
Yep.
Especially on a 3-ton.
Oh, it's not that bad.
It's
They're only 1.5.
You open the door and it shifts the world's,
Yeah, you're just used to
orientation.
those tinny Japanese
Oh
cars.
man,
That's all.
yeah. Oh man, it's such a difference in the feel of the cars. Yeah, I mean, even I saw a huge difference last year with the A7s. There's 2 events that I did before the end of the summer, one down in Davenport and then one with Fox Valley up at Road America.
Yep.
And one of the interesting things they did at Road America, it was on a hot day. It was actually like the perfect day. You kind of think for autocross, you're not going to get worn out from standing out in the sun like you do sometimes when it's a 90-degree day.
Mm-hmm.
But to kind of keep things moving along, because we had 150 drivers up there, they had you do 2 runs at once, essentially. Not right away. You'd go and do a run, and you get right back in
They
line.
just took like
into
a small group of cars.
Yep.
Like 25 cars.
Yep. No, it wasn't.
It's
it wasn't even that. It was
Was
probably
it 10 cars?
It was probably like 10 cars at a time. You came up.
They
you
call
ran.
it a rapid fire.
Yep. You
setup.
came up, ran your first heat or your first run, then went right back in the line.
Behind that same 10 cars.
Yep. And so there, I was able to put a ton of heat into the A7s. And then right after that event was the event at Madison International Speedway, where it only got up to like 60 degrees. I had no tire warming blankets at the time, and we had wind and shade on the track all day.
Right.
And
Leaves.
I couldn't predict what the car was going to do the entire day. It was a very frustrating day.
Yeah. That was the event that we had a bunch of leaves on the track, and it was like it was very clear where the cars were driving. Was that the event?
No.
Or was that
I
one
that
later
was
in the
that
year?
was no that was a I think that was a different year even.
No, it was definitely last year that we had a bunch
okay.
of leaves on the track, and we didn't have any way to clear them off. So as the day progressed, there was just like one
I don't
track
think-
that had grip.
No, I don't think it was that.
No.
No, I don't think it was that event. I don't think it wasn't a matter of leaves or anything like that. It was just
Just the coldness.
the cold. Yep. I like it just Because no, there was no leaves or anything because they had us going into like a 90-degree left-hander right away, and it was one of those things where I get up to it and I'd be like, oh, I'm braking too early, and then the next one I'd try to brake later, and you just blow
Slide
through.
right
Yeah,
through.
you like the yeah. It just I couldn't nail down where the grip was supposed to be,
Sure.
and so I'll be glad to be going back to something a little bit more consistent. I'm hoping, and maybe more time on the A7s. I would have figured them out, but I just, like you said, I can't hire someone to follow me around, and I don't
Right.
want to put a trailer hitch on my car.
I'm telling you, you just strap them right down on the back glass,
Yeah,
propped
yeah.
up on the little wing that you got back there.
And then when it shatters the glass, it's just weight reduction.
Yeah, and then you can stack stuff as high as you
Right,
want.
right. So along with the suspension stuff, which again you can see that on our Facebook page of revalving the shocks for the Z31 and a couple other things. The big thing that I wanted to try and do was add some aero to the Z31, and this is a little bit of a twofold. I want to add grip, but Kyle, who's one of the other trolls in the group, who also has a Z31, our cars are very identical in build in the sense that we have the same brand of shocks. He hasn't revalved them in any way like I have. He does not have a limited slip differential, but engine-wise, they're identical. They're both VG30 ETs. I do have a T3, T4 turbo, but I'm not running more than stock boost. Or not, I am running a little bit more than stock boost, but nothing different than what he's running
But he's
on
running,
the stock T3.
he's running quite a bit more than stock boost.
We'll define quite a bit
Whatever.
because stock boost is like 7 psi,
Right.
and
If I remember correctly, he's at like 15, is he not?
he's probably not over. He's not over 15 because I know 14 after like 14 psi, you really don't see much of
Right, you just lose a lot of
Yep.
efficiency on that.
Yeah,
turbo.
and I think I'm right at like 12.
Sure. Oh, okay.
You know,
Sure.
something like 11, 12, something like that.
Yep.
And I didn't go up with it any more than that just because I was trying to keep the car running.
As you had problems with in the past.
But it's been very reliable since then. So maybe I'll play with that a little bit this year, but I think it's pretty minor. I should say I haven't needed to turn it up because I've been able to beat Kyle
Right.
every time. But he's always had a splitter, and he's always had he had a whale tail that he had some Lexan added to try and add some downforce to the rear. And this year he's moved to, I think it's a 68-inch wide 9 Lives Racing wing that's mounted to the chassis. So he's doing that. I've got about a 58-inch Lexan spoiler that I'm going to run along with the splitter. And we've done corner balancing and stuff with our makeshift 16 bathroom scale, but to try and help balance out the aero with the corner balancing is I'm going to be using what you can see here is a ride height sensor. And essentially what this is a potentiometer. So as it moves, the resistance changes. And the idea is to attach this to control arm or something else that moves up and down as the suspension moves on all 4 corners. And as it moves, your resistance should tell you, based on what your length here is and how that changes from a geometrical standpoint. You can figure out how much your spring has been compressed when, let's say you drive the car at 40 miles an hour for 30 seconds, and you can average out what that travel is. And that will tell you how much your spring is compressed, and then tell you at that corner what your downforce is based on your spring rate. So I'm going to be doing that on all 4 corners. And I've got the ride height sensors working and recording data. Still working through the code a little bit, and that's just being run through an Arduino setup. And that will hopefully help me kind of get a little bit more grip. I'm not sure if there's a better way to do it. I know CFD testing and wind tunnel testing. Wind tunnel testing is not something I'm going to take my car to because it'll fall apart in the wind tunnel. Fender will fly off or something, So there's it'll be interesting to see what happens because I haven't run a splitter before.
Sure.
I've only run the stock spoiler, so it'll be interesting to see what that kind of does with the aerodynamics of the car. I'll probably do some tough testing along with that just to see what it's doing with the hood and everything, especially with the gaping hole I have.
Right.
Yeah.
With the intake manifold sticking out.
And you can actually, so I'm running this on all four corners, but you actually don't have to run it all on all four corners. You can actually also, there is a method to attach it to the center of the sway bar. Oh. And as the sway bar deflects and moves, that theoretically tells you what your total downforce is. Or I shouldn't say not deflects this way because it's going to turn. And as it turns, it would move this up or down.
Right.
And from there, you'd be able to figure out what your
so
downforce is.
You would just have one front, one rear.
Right. Which would be very helpful. I think it's going to be better to do the four corners to differentiate. Okay, am I creating more downforce on this corner? If I am, why?
Right.
So I think that'll help kind of narrow down some of that. But I'm very excited to try that out and see what develops from there.
Yeah. Data acquisition is always your friend.
Sometimes. Sometimes you don't like what the data says,
and
then you just ignore it anyways. Oh. So then the next event, we're at the Dells.
Yep.
Which is a parking lot setting instead of a circle track, which is always, I find now that I've done, especially last year when I did a little bit more down with Davenport at the Iowa National Guard base, it was easier for me to get lost in the cones. And I noticed this too when we were able to race at Miller Park. Miller.
Not American Family.
Yep. No, Miller Park. It was always easier to get lost in the cones.
Sure.
And I think it's just
because from any one viewpoint, you just look out and it just looks like a sea
right. And on the circle track, you've got the elevation changes kind of helping guide you.
Relatively directional.
Yep. Yeah, that's true. It is usually relatively directional. Which I haven't been there. I know Ryan and Kyle.
You haven't been to Ho Chunk either?
Nope.
Yeah, neither have I. This will be my first time there also.
Yep.
So it'll be. I didn't make the event that they had there last year.
Right.
But on top of it being one of our very few or only parking lot setting, it's actually, this is a good event because it's for Crews for a Cause.
Oh, that's right.
So the money is actually, once our club breaks even on operating costs for the day, the rest of the money is just donated to the charity.
Correct. And if I'm not mistaken, that event is actually, that event is already filled out. So we've already broken even.
Yep.
That is a very cool event. If things work out and some of the people drop off the wait list, I know Kyle will be there with us.
Yep.
And I may be co-driving that. Otherwise, I will be
co-driving
the Sonoma.
And man, let me tell you, it's an S10 chassis. It's okay if we go. But let me tell you, it's going to be unlike anything else you've ever driven before because
slow.
The steering is vague, The steering is vague, and the brakes don't matter.
The steering is vague. I think I can deal with because the Camaro did not have. It's like a tractor steering box.
Is that?
Yes, it's a steering box
and linkage, so it's pretty much the
same
exact
thing. It's just like what you were doing as we were driving today in your
get
truck.
about this much before it does anything at Yeah.
Shake the steering wheel.
So, but yeah, I'm trying to think if I've ever had anybody else co-drive it with me or not.
I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
I know Reed has talked about co-driving it with you.
Yeah.
I need to get Frankie out and co-drive it.
Yeah, for sure. I invited him.
So a little too late for the wait list, though.
For this event, yeah. But
Yeah,
I also
yeah.
I told him that he was welcome to drive with me at the May 23rd event up at Road America.
Okay, that one I won't make.
So, boo.
Yeah.
But for Frankie, it just depends on if Matt shows up with his Miata or not.
Right.
Because Frankie said that he's going to co-drive with Matt some this season too.
Okay.
So.
Well, we'll see.
Yeah.
I know Matt's they're racing up at USA, and Matt that we're talking about is has a K swap Miata that he finished this year, and that's got tons of aero on it as well.
Yep.
A very light
Along
car.
with really good suspension setup.
Yep.
Good tires and all that good.
I think it was 230 wheel horsepower, and I think the car weighs like 2,300 pounds or something like that.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a very quick car, a lot faster than it has been in the past.
For sure.
From its 190 or whatever 110 horsepower engine it had, not 190. But he's racing that tomorrow. So as long as he doesn't blow it up tomorrow.
Yeah. I mean, bad things happen sometimes. But
Right.
I think Matt's got a pretty solid handle on building
Yep.
that stuff.
Yep.
So
No, definitely.
he should be good to go.
So.
What else? Anything? We were talking a little bit earlier about before the podcast started here about different types of racing
Yep.
and the things that we would consider. So something that has just recently come around in autocross is national level big events
Yep.
that actually have some sort
Cash
of payout.
payout, which I think, King of the Mountain was around before COVID.
Yes.
But the whole Optima thing, I may be wrong, but I don't believe the original Optima Ultima Streetcar Challenge, which didn't happen last year because of COVID. So they did that one big autocross, which had a payout.
Right.
But they did not have any payout of any kind.
Yeah, to my understanding.
And at SCCA Nationals, you win a set of tires.
Yeah.
But they didn't have a payout of any kind, but you got to go to the SEMA show.
Right.
As kind of essentially a
it's a way to get sponsors and
right.
get attention drawn to a lot of those guys that are running national level have businesses
Building
supported
those
by
cars,
or around
yeah.
race cars and stuff like that.
Right,
So,
right,
it's just good business attention, stuff like that.
right.
But
Yeah, so I don't think it would have happened without COVID as growing as it has, because even King of the Mountain escalated what their payout is going to be for this coming year.
which
Or
may have been
Did they escalate the total? It's just the total amount of payout they
total
escalate, not the payout at the end. Sorry.
they raised
they
they
escalated.
raised their total purse.
Right, they raised their total purse, but did they raise first place purse? Was it 10,000 before? Now it's 15,000.
Let me check.
But yeah, it's interesting to see something like that kind of develop for autocross, and what that's going to kind of mean for the future of autocross. I mean, SCCA Nationals has. I mean, it's a well-known organization and certainly builds a reputation for someone if they win at nationals. But are they going to lose some attention from events like this, and will more events pop up like this? Yeah, it doesn't say on there, does it?
Well, it does say that they
it-
have a $25,000 payout that pays out to the top 8 spots.
I thought it was 25,001 because
Correct, because the Optima event was
was
25,000 to win.
right,
Yeah.
right to win.
Yep.
And they had 25,001, and it was 15,000 for first place, $5,000 for second and third. Second and third place, and then fourth place got $1 because they felt bad for fourth place because they got so close, but they just didn't quite make the cut.
That was at the Optimum event?
Mm. That's for King of the Mountain this year.
Oh, okay.
I believe it's supposed to be.
It says,
I know it says 25,000, but if I remember correctly from their like announcement video on Facebook, it was $25,001.
Right.
Because that $1 goes.
But I think that they've changed it a little bit since then because it's 25,000 total payout that pays out to the top 8 spots now is what it says on
really?
the website. Yeah.
Oh. Okay, that is different then.
Yeah. So.
That's different than what we were even thinking earlier tonight. Then.
Right. Yeah. Because.
Oh, okay.
Like we watched that.
The announcement.
The announcement video.
Yep.
And I think you're correct that it paid out
to the top 3 and then
plus $1 to the fourth position.
Oh, okay.
But it says right on their website here that it's payable to the top 8 spots now.
Because that's almost getting more into like circle track and dirt track style reward systems.
Yep, closer. Which, I mean, really, does it draw a lot of attention to pay out 10,000 to the top spot? Absolutely. Absolutely. But would it draw an equal or maybe even greater amount of attention if it paid out to the top 25 spots in lower amounts? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and
because then
I think that's part of like
because then you're going to attract the attention of people who look at say the 2 people who won the last 2 King of the Mountains.
Right.
And they look at those cars and those drivers and they're like, I can't compete with that.
Right.
But then they look at 10 or 15 or 20th place down the list and they're like,
well, now I can
take that guy.
Yeah, and then of course that drives that. Okay, next year I can do better.
I could win $1,000 if I went there.
Right. Right. And I don't know if you will see that, because especially the way King of the Mountain works is it's not unrestricted. There's obviously restrictions in place, but it's it's weight requirements and. That's basically it, right?
I mean, it
has to be a production car.
They had the rules for this year is actually a lot more structured than it was the last 2 years.
Okay.
So because the last 2 years were like 200 treadwear tire.
Oh yeah.
Show up and run.
Yeah. But there's weight tire restrictions.
But this year they have a weight. They have a weight limit for each class, if I remember correctly, and tire restrictions, and the rules are a lot more similar to.
I wonder if that eight payout is payouts to the different classes, because that's where I was kind of going with this. Is I don't know if you'll see, payout for the top 25 people. You might see payout for first, second, and third place in this class. First, second, third place in this class. Or, just first and second in these classes, and depending on how many classes, you might have it, but you still got to be top.
But the way that King of the Mountain is structured is they have 4 classes, and then they take the top so many drivers from each class that go into the shootout.
Oh, that's right. And then the shootout is your only restriction in That's right. And your only restriction in shootout basically is weight and tire requirement then.
No.
Yeah, you have to meet a minimum weight to win.
Well, yes.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
You do have to meet those requirements.
Right.
But you also have to meet the other requirements of your class.
Right. I'm just yes. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, that's why I was thinking it was pretty much unrestricted. But you're right. There's classes, and then they pick from those classes, and then all the classes compete against each other. Because basically, for King of the Mountain, to get into King of the Mountain, your class basically doesn't matter. Because it's the events, it's like the drive autocross events before King of the Mountain, and then you get to King of the Mountain, and then it's just everyone runs against each other, isn't it? I know they pick 200 drivers, but they're not picking from each class of those 200 drivers, isn't it?
They have the 4 classes, and they run like their qualifying laps, and then they don't just take the fastest 25 drivers, to my understanding.
Okay.
For this year, they take like the top 5 or 6 drivers from each class.
Okay.
Yeah. I could be mistaken about that, but to my understanding and my
Okay.
recollection, that is what they're doing this year.
That could be interesting.
Yeah, because they want to have a fair mix of
Right,
vehicles in the
right,
shootout.
right. Okay. Interesting.
Which
So that
this
means
is the first time I've ever seen this. Typically, when you go to an autocross, it's $50 to register for an autocross. Given this has a huge payout potential,
right. Well, and it's 2 days of autocross,
it is 2 days of autocross, which
and you don't have to work.
and you get lunch and a T-shirt and an extra meal on Thursday and music
Friday
on
entertainment.
Friday.
No, because I did see that too, but because it was one of those things looking at it. If you're not having to work, you don't have the changeover in heats. How many runs are you getting? Because it's kind of you can look at it as the same way as high speed autocross. Yeah, it's gonna cost you $200 for the day, but how does that compare to the $50 of an autocross when you look at dollar per time
Right.
or time per dollar or whatever you want to say?
Yep.
And the HPD and high speed autocross ends up being the better deal.
For sure. Yeah, you get more track time for your
Right,
dollar.
right. And I don't know. I don't know if that's the same with this. I don't know how many runs they do.
Right.
For the autocross, it almost sounds like it says 2 days of autocross, but if I remember correctly from the schedule, it almost sounded like there was two
There's
autocrosses.
1 day of qualifying and 1 day of the shootout.
Right, right. And the qualifying almost sounds like two autocrosses.
Right.
Like
yes.
there's a morning qualifying, and then there's this afternoon qualifying.
Because
But everyone competes in both of them. It's not just.
they have 2 courses.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Well, see, then there's another added factor.
Yeah.
So you're getting a course mix up halfway through the day, which is kind of cool.
Which I did see that I think the Team Cross event
Right. Was going to be an example of.
was going to be one of the
Those
courses
courses.
that they're going to run in.
Okay.
Yep. So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Give
The
you a
team
little-
cross sounded cool too.
The Team Cross does sound really cool.
Yep.
Basically, four-man teams.
Yep. 4-man teams with 2 late model and 2 early model.
Yep.
Style cars. There's 4 classes, but you just have to meet the late model and early model requirements. So
Yep.
you don't have to have all 4 classes, but you have to have 2 in the late and 2 in the early. And then it's how was it? Was it your best
average-
times were added up?
and averaged.
I don't think they were averaged. I think your best times were just added up
Oh,
and compared.
which
And maybe they were average, but I think it was just best times were added
I
up
mean,
and
it could be the same
compared.
results either way.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah,
So yeah, no, it's interesting because you're starting to see, especially like King of the Mountain, a little bit more of a payout system like circle track or dirt track
yep,
racing, and I don't think you'll see that on a local level by any means, unless
Probably
the events
not.
start to get really big or more expensive.
I can specifically think of one club that could do that,
Yeah,
but there's
and they when you like it. Well, I guess it depends on the payout too. I mean, you're doing $25,000 worth of prizes.
which is
you're gonna-
obviously part of it comes from the driver registration at $325 a driver,
Right.
but then also a lot of it comes from sponsors.
Right. But is that the difference between the FTE gets $200 or you know what I mean?
Yeah,
and,
I mean-
and things like that. And yeah, maybe your registration jumps up from $50 for the day for $100 for the day, but at the same time, are you gonna kill off your
I mean,
people coming into it?
even if you only bumped it up, like you have a lot of events where you have 70 to 100 drivers. So
Right.
even if you only bumped it up $10 for the event,
Right.
you could make a payout system.
Right.
And if there's a payout system,
That's gonna pull
You-
in people.
fill it up every single time.
Right.
If you ever struggled to fill your events before,
Right.
you'd have no problem if people could win their registration back.
Right. I wonder if that changes classification for like a club from a tax standpoint. Maybe that's why it's not as big.
I mean, it's still not a profit.
Right.
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah, I don't know.
We'll have to bring that up.
Things,
next
yeah,
time.
I know. Things to delve into for next time.
And I know some of our club members watch and listen to this, so we'll already have put a bug in your ear before the next
Yep.
meeting.
Well, there won't be a meeting for a while.
No, yeah, because we're not
Season,
doing
yep.
season meetings.
Yep.
Off season only. Yep.
Well, I think that's good for now. I think we've taken enough of people's time on useless topics for the day. So yep, the M3 is going to come out with a manual unless you get the competition model. I couldn't get the 295s I wanted, which is the Cooper RS3R, which probably won't see a whole lot of autocross. It sounds like an endurance tire, just like the new Continental 200 treadwear tires being marketed as an endurance tire. But I got lucky and I found some Federal 295 RSRRs, so I'm running that for the season.
You couldn't get the tires you wanted, but you got the tires that you needed.
Well, to be fair, actually, that's true. But to be fair, I wanted the RRs first because when they first came out, I saw the price and I was like, all right, I'm going to run those for this year because that's...
What they end up being, like $400 less than the next closest?
Yeah, so it's...
size?
Well, with tax, it was like $844.
Super reasonable for that size of tire.
Yep, and I think Falcons were at like $1,200, and everything else was more or right around that price. The Coopers were right around the Falcon price, from what the estimates I got through Extreme Tire. They weren't quite sure until they got them what the price would be.
Sure.
So no, yeah, about $400 in savings, which is
half of another set of tires.
well. That's, I mean, I'm not even spending $400 on setting up this ride height.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It pays
kit.
for other mods.
Right. Exactly. So
Yeah.
it was well worth it. I mean, it basically covers that as well as the G-Lock brakes that I ordered for the car. So it was well worth that sacrifice, I guess, for a tire that isn't the greatest, but
Sure ain't the worst.
no, it ain't. not for the price.
It's shocked a lot of people.
Right. And then we just kind of, we saw that tires are running right where we would think they'd be. Our buddy did pretty well with the Federal RS Pro, or 595 RS Pro.
Yep.
So if anyone knows of a review out there, I'd love to see it because I'd like to see how it kind of compares to some of the tires out there. You know, if it's supposed to be a compound change from the RR. I'm not sure if I quite believe that.
One thing's for sure, they're quieter on the road.
Yeah. But it'd be interesting to see how they compare to something like an RE7R, or even the newer Falcons or something. Yep, just to see where they kind of fall in line. And I guess kind of for next time, we'll kind of look into the monetization of placements in autocross.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So, thank you for joining us, and again, I'm TJ.
And I'm Tyler.
Thanks for joining us for Hammered with Cars. Thank you.